do swords make a Schwing sound when you draw them? Well, let's try it out. I have a bunch of swords here. No? Not really. Kind of. Not really, sort of. No. So, no, pretty conclusively. So, why do certain swords make sounds, while others don't? I have broken it down into three main causes. The first of which is the blade geometry itself. The second is the hilt construction. And the third is, of course, the sheath, as others have noted. For example, Matt Easton mentioned in his follow-up video an explanation that the sheath's hardness, the mouthpiece, affects that. And that is true to an extent. But that's only one of the reasons a sword will make a sound like that. For starters, let's compare how these two sound when I hit I have a barbell here on the floor, for weightlifting, and I'm going to hit one of the weights I have there with the flat of the sword. This is the Viking sword. You're going to hear it now. Fairly clear sound. I'm going to gently wrap it with the edge. Still quite a fine sound. Gently. So this is a tuning fork, essentially. Let's try the katana. First the flat. Let's try the edge. Even worse. No swing. So there's a difference in the blade geometry between these swords, and that affects it quite a bit. But that's not all. I mentioned the hilt construction. I've actually put these away, and I'll explain it a little bit better with another sword. Generally, when you make a sword or sword-like object with a blade and the right mass and proportions, it tends to have certain properties. One of these properties is that it has 2 points called generally nodes of no vibration. Also the blade node and the hilt node, as generally understood. This sword is fairly good, the cold steel Italian longsword, in that it shows fairly clearly where these points are. I'll show you it's about there. On the blade, you can't really see it on camera, I think, but it doesn't want to vibrate there. The other point is located in the hilt. See a little better. So the other point is here. So there are 2 points on this sword where it doesn't really vibrate. Now, as you'll notice, there's a lot of hilt going on here. And I'll contrast that with the Viking sword. Again, draw it out. So, what's the difference between these two hilts? See, actually I'm going to showcase the vibrations on this one. So the note is there, and I'll say there. So, see if you can, on these 2 points, notes of no vibration. So it doesn't vibrate in my hand here, and it doesn't really vibrate here when I hit with the sword. So what's the difference between these two hilt nodes? Well, it's quite obvious. There's a lot more handle going on here, a lot more hilt. And what is the hilt? It's a piece of wood against the metal. Wood doesn't really vibrate as well as metal. So the blade itself is acting as a string, but the hilt is acting like a damper. So when you have a long hilt like this, it absorbs a lot of that recoil, the spring. So a short-hilted sword like this, very nice sound. A long-hilted like this sword with a much fatter and, well, the thing about this sword is it vibrates quite well, as you can see. So it's quite a good string. So it should make a sound, one would think. But because of the long hilt, it really doesn't. The hilt absorbs most of that sound, as you notice. So even with a very good blade and a rigid sheath, because of the long hilt, it doesn't want to make a sound. It's very quiet. Contrast that to the Viking sword with a very good vibration from the blade. Can't really see it because it's too small. See the tip maybe? Yeah, the tip. And a rigid sheath and a short handle. You'll get, it's a diamond. This one's a little bit all over the place. Sometimes you get it. Let's see if I can a third time. You get it weakly. And then with the Chinese down, because this one is pretty much broken, it's just metal. You see a little bit of a pattern here, underneath, and here. It's supposed to be like this. So normally was, you put the blade in, about the full length. So it literally snapped off by the crossguard. So this thing has no wood absorbing that sound. So you'll notice is, I don't even need metal to make it ring. I can just draw it across the wood. Makes a beautiful sound. I put in the sheath. As you can hear. I can even do that test with other swords. I take the Viking sword and I draw against the wood. Makes gentle, quite a gentle sound. It's not sideways motion. Or, for example, the katana. No sound, because it is very rigid, doesn't want to vibrate at all, long wooden handle, all the sound is absorbed. What about the rapier? It makes some sound, but if I'm going to hit it against the metal, does that really make a sound? I'll try it with a wood test. This really doesn't want to ring. So this one is, I would say, too narrow and, well, the blade just doesn't want to make a sound. Get in there. So I think the Schwing sound originally comes from, originally probably was popularized by Kung Fu movies where they had the oxtail dao, which is the modern Kung Fu sword. It's very wide, and very narrow. So it wants to vibrate quite well. Makes a lot of sound. So, very good for showy performances. You can also test it with other swords here, which I have this cold steel cutlass machete. And I'm going to put it in this. And, nope, because no sound. It's too thick, doesn't really have harmonic properties to make any sound. It just rattles. But contrast that with this Latin machete, which is quite a beautiful sound. I actually like this even more than the Chinese dao. So this makes quite a nice sound. Let's try that. Oh, that was nice. Pure sound. I quite like that. Now, there are, of course, exceptions. I don't have any here, but I own two Federschwerts, both Regagnier, and originally they made a very nice, beautiful, clean sound, especially when I hit something light with the tip. But with use, they started to make a duller sound. So I think there's something in the hilt construction which settles in with age. So originally they might have been sort of free from the wood, but with use the wood was sort of stuck onto it more, absorbing the impact more effectively. I think that's what happened. I'm not exactly sure. You'd have to probably cut it open, a new one and an old one to see the difference on the inside. So that's kind of hard to say. Yeah, that's about all. So